Okay. Okay. Well, why don't we all introduce ourselves to Britt? I'm Eleanor Ravel. I'm council member in the 7th Ward. And you know Kristen. Maureen, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I'm Maureen McDonald. I'm the Executive Director at Peer Services. We're substance use treatment and prevention in Evanston and surrounding areas.
Angela?
I'm Angela Valavanis. I'm a business owner in Evanston, creative co-working on Davis Street, and I'm on the boards of the Evanston Chamber and downtown Evanston.
James? If to.
Good afternoon. I'm James Barnett, a community programs manager at Connections for the Homeless. And as the name implies, we provide services to our population. Most importantly, we try to get them housed.
Patty?
Hi, I'm Patty Poots, the Executive Director of Impact Behavioral Health Partners. And Impact provides permanent supportive housing, employment services, community health nursing, and behavioral health care for adults with mental illness.
And Chris?
I'm Chris Voss. I'm the acting communications coordinator for the 911 Center, Police Department and Fire Department.
Great. And then I guess, Britt, you want to tell us about yourself and share with us information that you have for us today.
Sure. So I'm Britt Bodkin. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a school social worker at ETHS's Therapeutic Day School. And Meg mentioned in an email to Kristen, I believe, that I just came from spending a few years in District 65 as a social worker. And I interned at ETHS several years ago. And so I have a bit of a cool perspective of Evanston from being both in the elementary and in the high school setting and supporting them. And I just have a few thoughts to offer as we think about what might be supportive and alternative space to care for, I might say students at times, that's just my school social work, for young folks in the community. So is this a good time to just kind of roll through a couple of those thoughts?
Oh, great.
Okay. So something that I was thinking about is it's important to be really thoughtful about what would be developmentally appropriate interventions and being really clear that, you know, kids, as we know, have a different level of what they might need or how they understand certain things or how to approach that. And so being thoughtful about how can there be differentiated supports for different levels of people that might access this space. Also recognizing that someone may present a certain age and developmentally they might actually be a different at a different level. And so being cognizant of having those options to know how to really support from whatever developmental level that person may have. And please stop me at any point. I'll just keep talking until there's a question or feedback. Another thought is that I think it's really important to have resources available for both that person and their caregivers that has access afterwards, because I know that as a school social worker, a lot of what I'm doing is trying to connect people to, you know, what do you do outside of the space? And so I would think, especially in that sort of setting, which I can only imagine is already anxiety producing or stressful, giving tangible, like here's next step options for you, so you know where it's in the community or where to go next, or if something were to happen again, like here are your resources. I could see that really being comforting to that person themselves to continue whatever work may be needed based on what happened. And also for the families who are supporting them to have tangible ideas about how to support them. Because we want families to feel like they have the tools that they need to be able to support along the way, as I'm sure you all think and hope for. And just similar to think about just that situation being stressful, just naturally, and especially as a kid, if they're going to a place they've never been to before, or let's say, you know, if they're experiencing a mental health crisis, that is stressful within itself, you know. And I think about how kids are automatically, I have to be really thoughtful about the power differentiation that automatically happens based on age with students. And so how can I try to preview what's happening or have them understand like what what the process is or what's going on or what might come and happen in this space, being thoughtful about that sort of verbal intervention to help with any de-escalating that may need to happen if someone enters that space. You know, welcome to this center. This is what we're going to do here. This is what's going to happen next. Here are your options. Do you have questions? And I know that I have a lot of training from like crisis prevention and intervention, and there's a lot of good verbal skills and tools that are taught through that. And so I don't know if that's something that people have engaged in, or what that training might look like for folks that support that space. But I imagine that those verbal skills of intervention and de-escalating would be really helpful as you support these students, kids, young people. And then also, I would just think about, you know, in the Evanston community, we're such a diverse community, which is a beautiful thing. And it's really important. I mean, I'm speaking especially as a white person, to be thoughtful about anti-bias training and what are we doing to make sure that we're really being thoughtful of the holistic needs that a student might have, and how to not re-traumatize, or how to get really clear about how to meet whatever need might be there with all the factors of someone's identity or the experiences they have walking through the world with who they are. So those are my initial kind of thoughts to offer. Is there any questions, feedback that would be helpful?
I'm just gonna push a little further past some of that. So I explained a little bit, I think it was to Meg or Martha, I don't even know that you and I have directly talked about this, but a lot of what we've been doing over the last year is talking about an alternative to 911 response. But in that has come, right, where is spaces and places that people can go? Like we've talked to Turning Point and different places that run living rooms and drop-in centers. So that's kind of where this whole conversation came. But even those places only have spaces like that for adults, not for youth. And so that's where it was kind of like ETHS social workers, District 65, you know, would be really valuable to reach out to you all because you're working with youth every day, and what would be helpful. So I guess one of my questions is, you know, do you think a space, obviously with all of the things that you described being, you know, priorities and making sure training and the space is available and whatnot, but do you think as an alternative to say like hospitalization or, right, we know that there's no other spaces besides if somebody's in crisis and it's that, what else do you do besides try to de-escalate? If that doesn't work, oftentimes they get hospitalized. But do you think one youth and or staff would take advantage of having a different space, right, to de-escalate and have people go? And if so, we'll start there.
Sure. I would think that having options about where to intervene or how to intervene, I think in general would be supportive. You know, thinking about, you know, when kids are hospitalized, it can feel like a really scary and overwhelming experience just being in a hospital of all these different settings. And so I can see that if there was like almost a middle ground to have that intervention to see if a hospitalization is actually the next step, or if de-escalation and problem solving and supports can happen in that space. I could see that being a positive resource. And I wonder too, if families, and I don't know the answer, but I wonder if families would have differing levels of comfort of bringing their child to like a more living room format where there are people available to help support and assess from that perspective before going to a hospital where it can feel overwhelming to some people. And so I would think it would only benefit if that was an option that a family felt more comfortable engaging with. Though, again, I'm not sure what, I would imagine that like having that continuum of services or possibilities would then allow families to choose where they feel most supported and most comfortable. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's my initial thought. And I would think location too would really matter, right? Like if we know that hospitals are only in certain places of our community, where are we making sure that there are places for support intervention? Since a lot of our hospitals are on the east side or in Skokie, if that makes sense. So thinking location wise too, how that access could support a family who's trying to get support be more quickly.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Angela?
Yeah, right now, does District 65 or 202, do they have any supports for this sort of thing beyond the school day? Or is it strictly the cutoff with the school day?
So I'm thinking about it. I think it's a case-by-case basis if things happen outside of the school day for a support, let's say. So for example, like if a student had shared with me at the very end of the day that they wanted to harm themselves, like I would stay and support that student until after the school day, until they got whatever extra support they need. Though I don't know if that would I don't know if that would happen if something hadn't started within the school day itself for my role specifically. I know that ETHS has a health-based center that operates through North Shore independently in the system. And so I don't know if that is accessible outside of school hours, but that's something I wonder. And then I know on the District 65 side, I don't know about like crisis intervention, let's say after school hours, outside of just, as I said, risk assessments and supporting the family through how to do that, which would be an administrator role after, our union day was over, let's say. So I know that they have a whole department of family and community engagement as well. And so they might not be doing crisis intervention, let's say, but trying to support areas around family need beyond just school. So those are my initial thoughts. Though there could be more information out there that I don't know yet.
Other questions and thoughts?
One of the things that we heard in kind of like the other models, which again are for adults, but is a lot of them are like peer staffed by individuals, right, who have also, right, struggled with specific issues that they can relate. So a clinician there and, on call, ready to assess and make sure, people don't need a higher level of care, but also I think, we all know, I think we've heard a lot here, and I'm sure you as a social worker, right, kind of that peer-to-peer interaction or somebody who can relate or things like that can be helpful. And so I'm curious, obviously with a younger group, I wouldn't know necessarily, right, if it's youth that are that same age, but somebody, some other people that maybe aren't clinicians, but these youth could relate to and really just have as support and whatnot. Do you think that would be helpful for younger, for youth as it is kind of for adults?
Sure. I think as we think about like building relationship and trying to encourage comfort and safety, that because we can't ever define what safety means for somebody else, although we can think about how to set up as best as possible. I'm just thinking about being in a school setting. We have students that gravitate towards different educators for different reasons. And so I might have a certain clinical lens that gets pulled in at a certain level. Though if there's a student who feels like they enjoy checking in with this person because they have a similar interest or they feel like they understand them or see them a certain way, I do think that there's benefit to that. I would be curious about what does that look like in terms of confidentiality for people that enter in this space, and how does that get set up so that they know that if they don't have a clinical lens or like abide by confidentiality with their license, how does that look in that space? And I would think, for young people, having people even like college age who might have a certain maturity level or understanding about how to intervene could still feel like an opportunity to connect with somebody that's closer to you. Because I don't know if an elementary school student would want to volunteer for a space like that, but kind of linking in to how can I get more familiar. And then again, I think having like ideally having a wide gambit about identities that are represented in that space, because you walk into a room and it's nice to have options about who you might gravitate towards for whatever reason.
Good thoughts.
Thanks.
We've had some discussions about, all the different kind of community needs and age needs and, everything that in terms of kind of how to do this. And I'm wondering, what your thoughts would be about having a setting that was a living room that was available to all community members and was serving, teens at the same time. Like, because there's a part of me that thinks better to separate, and part of me thinks that's just really not practical. So I just wonder what you think maybe some of the pros and cons are there.
Sure. Thank you for asking. Ideally, I think it'd be nice to have like multiple options. If you can do more than just one setting, maybe it's a setting where they have a mixed group, and maybe there's a setting where it's only youth. Because again, we don't know, like I'm thinking about students who have high anxiety and who might not feel comfortable even just being in proximity with a bunch of adults they don't know, or the opportunity of an adult coming in the space. And who knows if there's, if their crisis has anything to do with people who are an adult or have authority or power over them. And so I think if there is like definitely at least having an option where it's solo space, so that the needs are very attuned to those kiddos. Though I can see that there could be some kids that feel comfortable going to a space where adults are also being served. And so I think it really, like both of those could be true to our population. It just depends on, their level of need. And I would think, again, this is likely something that feels really vulnerable. And so how can this space be set up in a way to try to offer as welcoming or inviting as possible? And I wonder if, just like, how do you look at where all the people are, to see if that feels comfortable to walk into and to know that you can get what you need with either being seen or unseen by other people, whatever your comfort level may be.
Okay, that's really helpful. And then let's just go one step further and think about having a living room versus having mobile crisis. That, is it ultimately just easier to have a fairly discreet kind of response team that shows up at a person's house rather than, or outside their house, obviously, not somebody who's going to drive, where it's someplace where the family has to go.
Right. I do think about transportation needs. Like I think having a physical living room place where you can go sounds great. And we have families that won't be able to get there unless there's public transportation really close by, and they have the funds and means to do that, and the access to get whatever they need to get there. And so I don't, it would be hard to choose like which would be the better of the two, because I think that each would have a beneficial space. If there was I think, if you do have a mobile crisis space that goes to a family or goes to that space itself, like we know that eliminates transportation barriers. So I think that that's really positive. And, I would be curious about how many people can utilize the living room space, and do you see that transportation is a barrier for that to happen, or are you getting stronger support by being able to physically intervene and go to where they are? Because I would also think that families would want, also the option of, I either like think that taking my child out of the space is helpful, or I can't go anywhere because they're not going anywhere, or I don't have the means to get there, so I need someone to come with me.
I don't know that we have to choose, because the funding comes from different places for the mobile crisis versus the living room. I was just trying to think about it from kind of the user perspective, like if I was a teenager with all the different kinds of considerations and concerns, where might I be more comfortable? A living room that has a lot of adults you don't know in it, because it will. I mean, I don't know that there's any way around that one. Or a mobile, don't know. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah. And as you're saying, as you're speaking, I'm thinking about like there might be students who feel safest being in their home space and in the familiar space, and there might be students who actually don't feel the safest in their space for whatever reason at that moment and want to be somewhere different.
I think as the two of you are talking too, Maureen, I like that you pointed out that it comes from different funding sources, because I don't know that it's an either or, because I think what we've talked about, what we've found on all this is that even right now, right, when an ambulance gets called or this, that there are no options of where to take people except for the emergency room, even when maybe it doesn't need to be an emergency room. So if we have like a mobile response unit that can physically go places, and then somebody does need to or wants to be taken out of that situation, wherever there's somewhere to go. But I also think if you have some type of mobile crisis unit like that, and it's people who we get out in the community that people are able to meet and actually know, and there might at some point be able to form some type of relationship there, and there's going to be more people obviously that utilize it more than others, or maybe just once, maybe more often. But I think if whoever's in this mobile response unit can build relationships and whatnot, that might help in bringing a young person into that space then that is the living room. Because we've talked about, even at like Turning Point, like police officers and firefighters and paramedics bring people to the living room because they're trying to avoid hospitals. And so I think with young people, there's a lot to consider, but if we're able to have both of those things and able to have a space for them to go and be brought, right?
Mm-hmm.
A relationship that's formed with the individuals that make up that mobile response team, I think is really powerful. And very important, all the things that you're bringing up, Britt, about training and how you manage that is so important with that initial context. I think that will help or can potentially help in making a young person feel comfortable in potentially being able to get out of their house and go somewhere that's safe where they can just hang out or, talk to people. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it sounds like as you're speaking, like there's almost an option if a mobile crisis person or group comes to a home to offer the option of like, do you want us to stay with you in your space, or would you like to come with us to a living room space?
Right.
That sounds kind of like an ideal rhythm or procedure to me.
Yeah, we don't at this point know kind of the order of events in terms of startup, but this group did a lot of really good thinking a year ago around community engagement, education, outreach, how we might help people understand what is and what it, what offers them. And so it's just a lot of things to think about, how we say it, who we say it to.
Right. Another thing I just want to mention before I hop off is thinking also, transportation is a need, but also childcare is a need, especially for people that have younger kids. They want to, like, families want to support their kid and wants to bring them somewhere, be present with them somewhere, but they have a little one at home. And so as you're thinking up these spaces, do you have childcare options for families who need to bring their whole family if they bring their child somewhere? Because they might not leave if they can't, or if they don't know where their kid's going to go, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's something was not on our radar screen. So thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to chime in. Out of all this talking, we have not talked about that. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Right.
I think just thinking about coming from the younger grades, like all of those little needs about, what do you do with a parent who's at work, but their kid needs support? Or what happens when they have younger students and need something, but can't quite do all of that? So, and also that transportation needs. So, thank you for raising all these different thoughts for such an important topic.
Yeah. Well, we know you need to hop off, and we really appreciate your sharing all that information with us. Good food for thought for us. And I imagine we'll be back in touch.
If you think of anything else or anything just pops up, Britt, feel free to email me or, anything like that. This is going to be an ongoing conversation with us. So.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Right.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this space. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Bye.
And I have to hop off too. I don't know. Cicely and I will, be communicating soon. We're still mostly just waiting for more information from, particularly about, how to pursue the living room concept, because I think that is going to be our role, and it's a lot of moving pieces.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, well, Kristen, thank you very much for arranging for this conversation today. I think it was really informative, and we'll be in touch. Whether there's a meeting in 2 weeks or what, we'll let you know. So,
Right.
okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, thank